Yo, what it is, YouTube? It's your boy Nitsa coming back with another bullseye of a tutorial here today on the channel. I got a highly requested, highly demanded, very wanted, very needed. They said they needed NBA YoungBoy YB. So let's jump into this vocal tutorial today right now. Let's not waste no time. If y'all do have any more questions, comments, concern, or any different type of artists y'all want to see, go ahead and drop it down below. Let's jump right into the music right away. Let's not waste a second. Let's go.
I pour numbers inside my cup and get the diatone, but I can't snooze long. Chasing money, I ain't chasing your bullshit. I'm taking steps to a whole nother level. I can tell you ain't the one you would do. You done ran all by a whole nother bezel. We ain't never making up you the room. Then reminiscing what you told me, covering up my feelings with the cold. Then let calls from the noblest. Till I pull up, they know I never run. They know I ain't scared of them. Take the fall for all my problems. Stay paid for all my partners. We gon' go like we'll go choppers. Play better to take care of them.
Ooh, so that was me trying to do my best impression of NBA YoungBoy. So it was a very interesting challenge. You know, usually when somebody tells me to do a template and they give me a song, I always challenge myself to do it. I don't ever try to take the easy way out and, you know, pick a song that would be easier for me. So with this one, I picked this song they requested. I think this is It Ain't Over by NBA YoungBoy. So I tried to tackle the challenge and I did my best impression of it. And I'm very confident with what we have here, especially the ad-libs. So let's jump into it right away today. I feel like with the ad-libs, I feel like that was really kind of like the highlight of the song. So that's what I went after a very first in the beginning is the ad-libs. And whenever I do a mix, that's the first thing I always ask myself, like, okay, what is the direction? What is the highlight? What is the money maker? And I feel like it was really the ad-libs in a situation like this. And let's look at some of the processing that we have for the ad-libs before and after to start off.
I owe you down. I said that my money, my pain ain't no make. I said that my money, my pain ain't no make me no better.
So yeah, you kind of hear the major transition that we went through. It was kind of difficult for me to do this NBA YoungBoy template. Very interesting because when I did the no cap, I ripped that. I ripped no cap so easy. But when it came to this YoungBoy template here, it was kind of very interesting because the thing about YoungBoy is that his voice is like, I would say high mid, but then he starts going up with the melodies, which is kind of like, it was a little bit difficult for me. So that's what I'm always trying to tell y'all, that, you know, it depends on how your voice is. Cause I have a voice that kind of goes down, you know, my voice is kind of deep a little bit, you know, type of like situation, but his voice is like high and it goes up. So it was difficult. The fact that I even was able to do it, I was like, ooh, I was so happy that I was able to do it and bring y'all something that's in the ballpark, you know? So let's look at the very first processing that I had. You know, my image that when I had in my head is New Orleans. Everybody knows New Orleans is known for the soul food. So I used my image of New Orleans, how I feel about them, to make the mix. So I used the V comp, which is creamy, warm, and rich and soulful. So that's what pretty much what I went after with this song. Then after that, we had the meta flanger, which just kind of really helps give that swimming type of effect. And let's listen to that with and without. So something like a meta flanger is incredible because it also has a little bit of that movement right here. So, you know, a phaser, a flanger, a chorus, all them things are a great way to add a little bit of movement to ad-libs, you know. So the ad-libs already kind of sounded good, but then we added that meta flanger, and, you know, where we put it at as well, it's affecting everything else. So the order of the plugins is very important to getting something like a YB sound. Then we did like a basic type of EQ. And with this EQ right here, it was a situation where I was just trying to really position the ad-libs and everything like that. So, you know, I wrote off a lot of the low end energy right here. And when you roll off the low end energy, it sets stuff in the back. And I wrote off a little bit of the top, trying to give it that warming characteristic. That's what I was thinking here, soulfulness. Then I used the R comp with the optical compressor fast attack to clamp on like the vocal right away, but a slow release to stabilize it, because the meta flanger is going all over the place. The delay is going all over the place, but I still want the listener to be able to focus on what he's saying. So also let's hear, you know, how that was like kind of like a big part part 2. So as you can see right there, based on that ratio and everything like that, it's really just clamping onto the signal. So that's what a slow release does. It helps stabilize something. I did not want that ad lib to be moving all over the place because the delay, the meta flanger, everything was moving all over the place. And sometimes when you do have like an ad lib or even a lead vocal that is too much action, it's gonna be harder for people to focus. It's like if I have my fingers, if I kept moving my fingers around like this and said, ooh, how many fingers I got, it's gonna be harder for you to understand versus if I just kept it up here. This is like a slow release time and this is like a fast release time. It's moving all over the place. A slower release time helps you understand where stuff is at because it puts it right in front of you. It stabilizes it essentially. All right, then after that we had something like the REQ, and with the REQ, we after I did the compression, sometimes when you tightly compact and compress something, it's like squeezing an orange. Sometimes some seeds, some skin, all of that stuff, pulp, it starts to come out a little bit more and you got to clean it up. And that's what I did with this second EQ move. So I wrote off a little bit more bottom. That kind of came through like the meta flanger as well as the R comp, and then I heard like a little resonance as well. So sometimes a lot of the energy, especially with a YoungBoy vocal, is in the high mid-range because he doesn't have a deep voice. And especially if you don't have a deep voice, which I feel like that's most people, I would love to see how many people do have a deep voice and don't have a deep voice. It would be pretty interesting to see that. But the main thing about it is when you compress it, sometimes you can actually end up squeezing that mid-range a little bit more and exposing more stuff. So that's why I did a little notch right here for YoungBoy as well. Then we have a couple of stomps, like a delay stomp. This is like I sent the delay inside of these delays and reverb, so it helped keep the dimension. It kept going over and we done so it was like a delay inside of a delay, and then we have some pretty basic H delays, nothing crazy, and then after that we have the R verb. So we have to understand what the R verb tube is. My pre-delay is on 0, so I want that reverb to work instantly. If you have more pre-delay, then it will have like a little bit of time difference between when the vocal comes in and the reverb comes in. So if you want something to stay in focus, you would use something like pre-delay, but I didn't. I wanted to wash it a little bit, and a part of washing that a little bit is also reverberating the lows. So that's why I have like a full frequency type of reverb thing going on here. When you reverberate the lows, it can kind of help wash away something. So if you maybe feel like your vocals sound muddy sometimes, you might just want to EQ the reverb maybe before and after, or even do something like a low shelf or something like that, because the more you reverberate your lows, it will make something literally sound smaller, because low end energy is a long sustaining energy. So when you have something like that, it kind of overlaps and it starts to build up and stuff like that. So that's kind of why like 808s and stuff is hard to hear on speakers, but you got to use that knowledge to understand that, if I want to wash away this and make it really feel like it's in the back with the ad-libs, I might just have to reverberate the lows a little bit, open up the bottom of the reverb for the ad-libs or the background vocals to help it really sit back. So that's what I'm trying to say. It will help it sit back. After that, we have the Abbey Road RS214, which is modeled after a modified all-tech compressor from Abbey Road. I love this thing. It's so gritty, distorted, and I use the compression in it. I use something like auto hold, which is a very interesting function. It really just clamps down on the signal. The preset was smooth vocal, and I feel like it really just stabilized the ad-libs. That's what I was looking for with the ad-libs. Stabilize it. So I love the meta flanger, how you can hear like you can hear all of the little nuances in between the vocal with the meta flanger, but then the Abbey Road RS124 brings it out even more. So parallel compression is used for a bunch of different things. Do you want it to do movement? You want it to stabilize something? You want it for a tonal characteristic? Or do you want it to really just add like a whole new bite or grit to something? So there's a bunch of different ways, and all parallel compressors are very interesting. So I use the fastest recovery, but even on fast recovery, it's pretty slow because it's a Verimute compressor. Verimute compressors, they use tubes, varying like the bias current. So like the Fairchild, is a Verimute compressor. The Manly, that's a Verimute compressor. And yeah, that was like the ad-libs that we have for NBA YoungBoy. So after that, let's go ahead and jump right into the lead vocal. So when I was doing this vocal, my thing about it was trying to make that bass sound like the high mids kind of sound smooth, because when I was mixing it, making my voice so high with that auto tune, like the sound that y'all want to get, it was kind of starting to hurt my ears a little bit. So that's why me personally, I always like dark vocals vocals, but I kept mixing it to the point where, you know, I took a break, came back, and then I feel like the highs were very pleasant. So that's what I was going for here, you know, soulful, smooth, high end. And, you know, one thing that I noticed too is that NBA YoungBoy's engineer, Mr. Jason Goldberg, I believe is his name, he likes to use the Neve 88 RS, which is an incredible channel strip. You know, it used to be a whole console. And the Neve 88 RS, it came around the time when the SSL console came in. So Rupert Neve, he got bought out. So I don't think the 88 RS was his invention at all. You know, it's coming from AMS Neve company, and pretty much what happened was Rupert Neve, the same dude that made the 1073, he sold his company. So after that, you know, in the 1980s, they went ahead and made like a new product, you know, under his name, and they made the Neve 88 RS. So I think this one right here is modeling the Neve 1084. But the main thing about it is with the Neve 88 RS, I did not have that. So I had to make my own Neve 88 RS. So I used this Neve EQ as well as this Neve compressor. So sometimes when you don't have the materials that you need to be successful, you got to stop making excuses and use the tools that you do have right now to get the sound in your head. So don't ever let anything stop you from getting the sound in your head. You know, half of the battle is already within inside of you. As long as you believe that you could get that bit of sound right, bro, it's going to sound right, bro. Trust me, bro. Go watch any of my other videos. You're definitely going to see that. So let's bypass this in and out to hear what was the differences.
I pour numbers inside my cup and get the diatone, but I can't snow long. Chasing money, I ain't chasing your bullshit. I'm taking steps to a whole nother level. I can tell you ain't the one you would do. You done ran all by a whole nother best, but we ain't never making up you the room. Then reminiscing what you told me, covering up my feelings with the cold. Then let calls running nosebleeds. Till I pull up, they know I never run. They know I ain't scared of them. Take the fall for all my problems. They pay for all my problems. We gon' go ride, we'll go choppers. Play better to take care of them.
All right, let me do one more example for y'all so y'all can hear this.
Numbers inside my cup and get the diatone, but I can't snow long. Chasing money, I ain't chasing your bullshit. I'm taking steps to a whole nother level. I can tell you ain't the one you would do. You done ran all by a whole nother best, but we ain't never making up you the room. Then reminiscing what you told me, covering up my feelings with the cold. Then let calls running nosebleeds.
All right, so that's kind of what we had right here. We took it from being like a very type of home recording to getting something that really sounded professional, I feel like. So, you know, with this one specifically here with the V comp, we weren't doing too much. You got to understand that when somebody don't have that much deepness in their voice, you probably shouldn't be rolling off too much low end anyways. The lack of low end makes something instantly sound brighter. So that's something to understand too, you know, the frequencies in relation to everything else. And then after that, you know, we did just a slight little low shelf because I did like a very nonchalant 47 roll off at you know, over here with the high pass, and then I rolled off just a little bit of top, little bit tippity top, because I was trying to make his vocal sound warm. And that's what I was going for, warm softness. So I kept that in mind as I was mixing. So what is this? We boosted up a little bit of the low frequencies actually, just to try to give that little bump, that little warmth, that little soul, still trying to give a little bit of power to his vocal. So you got to think about the strengths and the weaknesses of a vocal. So if I know he got a high voice, I'm trying to look for some power because I already know he got the highness. He already got the brightness inside of his voice. So I don't need to be adding that. That's what I'm talking about. Like, people don't be ever understanding, like, you don't got a deep voice, yet you want this bright ass microphone. You got to understand that you already have the brightness. The brightness is already inside of your voice. You just got to pull it out, bitch. You feel me? So I don't understand how people who got high voices, they want these bright old microphones. It's gonna really, sometimes it can really make it sound like a knife. You know, it's kind of like you have a knife, but you already sharpening it. You're making it worse a little bit. So sometimes I feel like for somebody who has a brighter voice, maybe they should use a warmer microphone, you know, just a microphone that has a smooth top, so that, you know, it just benefits their voice, you know. So their voice already got the brightness, but it's still gonna be smooth because the microphone is smooth, you know. It all depends on how you want the camera to take a picture. So then after that, with the EQ move, I was just really working on the low end of his vocal. Like I said, out of the gate, I already knew it's a light voice. I got to work on the low end. So I started pushing these bands here, and I was doing a lot of boosting EQ in the situation, just really like working on the mid-range. And yeah, you know, pretty much this is all the EQ settings I have here. And this is kind of like a Neve 1084. The difference between the 73 and the 84 for the Neve is that the 84 gave them the high pass and the low pass, and it also gave them the high Q. So that makes the, you know, the width of the EQ a lot more narrow Then after that, we have something like the V-Comp, and with the V-Comp, this is modeling, you know, a Neve compressor as well. So I made my own Neve 88 RS, kind of like how I know they use on YoungBoy Voice. I turned on the limiter as well, but the compressor becomes like before the limiter. So, you know, I had a slow attack on the limiter, really just helping everything come through a lot with an automatic release. But then with the ratio, I like to use something like 4:1. It was just really helping give his vocals some more body. That's what I was looking for, this compressor. So compressors you use for different things, movement, you know, do you want to control a performance, or in a situation like this, do you want to add a little bit of weight?
I pour numbers inside my cup and get the diatone, but I can't snooze long. Chasing money, I ain't chasing your bullshit. I'm taking step to a whole nother level. I can tell you ain't the one you would do. You done ran all by a whole nother bezel. We ain't never making up you the room. Then reminiscing what you told me, covering up my feelings with the cold. Then let calls running up.
So yeah, I really like what that was doing right there, just due to the fact that it was just, you know, it was giving me more of the strengths, you know, pretty much what I, you know, liked a lot about the warm V-Comp as well, is that it also has a de-esser. So pay attention, like I'm really trying to work on the top end of his vocal and get the body right. So essentially I turned on the de-esser. I don't know what range this de-esser is working at, but it definitely helped. They kind of smoothed it off a little bit. And yeah, we're not doing too much compression, like 1 to 3 dB. This is a very powerful flavored compressor. Then after that, we have a de-esser. I feel like I was being aggressive as hell with this de-esser here. Let me just look real quick, because you know his voice is just like that type of NBA YoungBoy. You know, it's all about trying to make that sound smooth, because he already has the brightness inside of his voice.
I pour numbers inside my cup and get the diatone, but I can't snooze long. Chasing money, I ain't chasing your bullshit. I'm taking step to a whole nother level. I can tell you ain't the one you would do. You done ran all by a whole nother bezel. We ain't never making up you the room. Then reminiscing what you told me, covering up my feelings with the cold. Then let calls running nobly.
All right, so that you guys see how much the de-esser was working, about 1 to 2, and after that we had like a C4 multiband. Essentially with the C4 multiband here, this is kind of like almost the default preset, but I was using a fast attack on the high mid, just really trying to warm up his vocal, because you know, with the high voice like YoungBoy going up and down, it can kind of get annoying, sharp and piercing, especially when you put auto tune on it. But this is the sound that y'all wanted, so I'm trying to show y'all how to get it. And pretty much I used a really fast attack just to really like zap the high mid energy and a fast release. You know, usually when it comes to the low frequencies in the lower spectrum, that's where a lot of the energy is a lot slower, so I would use something like a slower releases, kind of like how I use right here. But in the higher portion, that's where the energy is faster, it's more moving around. So I use the fast attack, fast release up over here to you know, kind of clamp down on a little bit, to really just kind of de-harsh the vocal, not necessarily, but to really just tonally control it, because a high mid voice, it could kind of move around a lot, and he's going up with melodies, all of that stuff like that. So you know, we don't want the vocal to be annoying. That's something that can happen with people who do have like a high voice, I'm not gonna lie, you know, and they trying to use auto tune with a bright microphone, it could get squeaky. But this is what this template is all about. If you do have a high voice, this is definitely going to help you, because it's just really built around a vocal trying to tonally balance a higher voice. Yeah,
I pour numbers inside my cup and get the diatone, but I can't snooze long. Chasing money, I ain't chasing your bullshit. I'm taking step to a whole nother level. I can tell you ain't the one you would do. You done ran all by a whole nother bezel. We ain't never making up you the room. Then reminiscing what you told me, covering up my feelings with the cold. Then let calls running nobly.
So as you can hear, that C4 made a huge difference, and with the range, that's how far do you want it to compress. So I didn't want to compress too much of my low end. Usually I might start at something like 14, 15, you know, all the way down there, but I stopped it at 11, just because I felt like, okay, you know, I need to preserve the low end of his vocal as well. And you really just heard how it kind of like really just made the vocal sound a little bit more smoother, but especially because he's rapping fast with a high voice, all that high mid energy is going all over the place. So we just really want to clamp on that, control it, tell that bit to sit your head down pretty much. So that's what we did with the C4, you know. And then after that, we have the R comp, and I used it on electro. This is like a low level compressor, you know. So after I've done all that compression, I still want to bring out a little bit of that detail and a little bit of the air. But rather than using something like a static EQ to boost air, I'm using a low level compressor. So when you use a lighter ratio, essentially what it does is it lets you put your hand more into the cookie jar. that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to put more of my hand into the cookie jar. So if you use a fatter ratio, the ratio is like skinny and fat. So this is kind of like a skinny ratio, but if you use like a ratio of 4:1, the compression is going to be a little bit more dense. You're going to be able to hear kind of like the compression characteristics, but that's not what I really wanted. I wanted to use this as a construction worker, put my hands inside the cookie jar like a chef. So let's pay attention to what this compressor is doing too.
I pour numbers inside my cup and get the diatone, but I can't snooze long. Chasing money, I ain't chasing your bullshit. I'm taking steps to a whole nother level. I can tell you ain't the one you would do. You done ran all by a whole nother bezel. We ain't never making up you the room. Then reminiscing what you told me, covering up my feelings with the cold. Then let calls from the noblest.
So as you can hear with this compressor, what it's really doing right now is it's really just helping add some of that air, some of that detail, bring some of that focus. That's what I'm really trying to do, you know, because high mid energy, it moves around a lot, I'm telling you. So me understanding that, I'm like, okay, I want to really take this high vocal and really just concentrate it so the listener can, oh, it's out my diatone, but I guess no, chasing money, I ain't chasing no. So, you know, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to stabilize that vocal a little bit. So it's kind of like nibbling on the vocal with something like electro. And this is the beautiful thing, that it's an 1176 emulation, but I get the controller release time with manual, and I used warm. Like I said again in the beginning, that I'm looking to give a warm, rich characteristic. And then after that, we came to Kramer tape, and what was the preset? IPS de-esser, which is crazy. So I'm using the tape as the de-esser in a situation like this. And pretty much, like I said, I was trying to de-harsh this vocal. You know, when you have a high mid vocal with auto-tune, it can definitely start to become a problem. So this is for people who are struggling. They have a high voice, they don't have no deepness in their voice, but they still want a vocal that sounds professional. And that's what I'm giving here. You can also check out my my no cap template as well. You know, so I always try to do some of the deep voice rappers, some of the high voice rappers, some of the melodic rappers, and the regular rappers. That's what I'm always trying to do. So if y'all guys got any questions or suggestions for artists, drop it down below. Pretty much we using the tape as a de-esser, pretty much is what we're doing right here. And it's also, I was also boosting up a little bit noise because Louisiana, you know, I'm thinking about the soul food. I'm thinking about a crab boil, a crawfish boil type of situation. So you know, I just used you know, a situation like this where I actually used over bias as well. And when you over bias the tape, it actually kind of rolls off a little bit of the high end as well. So yeah, let's listen to what it sounded like with and without.
I pour numbers inside my cup and get the diatone, but I can't snooze long. Chasing money, I ain't chasing your bullshit. I'm taking steps to a whole nother level. I can tell you ain't the one you would do. You done ran all by a whole nother bezel. We ain't never making up you the room. Then reminiscing what you told me, covering up my feelings with the cold. Then let calls from the noblest. Till I pull up, they know I never run. They know I ain't scared of them. Take the fall for all my problems. They pay for all my partners. We gon' go ride, we'll go choppers.
So with the tape, it kind of gave like a slight compression characteristic, but I really like the tape as well because it really smoothed off the top of his vocal, you know, like with the high vocal, you know, sometimes you do want to use something like tape. That's what tape is very known for, you know, having like a smoothing of the high end, because tape, you know, they were always trying to boost clarity back in the days with the tape. They was always trying to fight noise. But one thing about tape is it definitely helped everything sound very smooth and very rounding of the transients. Usually the transient of the voice is the high mid energy. So I went with something like the tape, knowing that, hey, you know, tape knows how to smooth out the transients. High mid energy is transient, so I picked the tape. So you got to always understand your tools and everything like that when you're trying to process a vocal. Then we have another REQ, nothing crazy, and with here we just barely rolled off any low end, just really tightened up the lows. We did like a little dip right here, but this is very minimalistic. And with the boost at the high mid, just doing a little bit of recovery from the tape, because the tape did smooth it off. So, you know, mixing is all about counter moves, push and pull, all that stuff like that, you know. So the tape smoothed it out, but then I did a slight little boost right here that, you know, retained my top. No coincidence, his name is Top. And then we used another de-esser right here. I think this one is a heavy de-esser. So this is all about, you know, controlling that bright voice. I don't want it to sound too harsh. I want it to sound bright. You know, he has a light voice and he still wants it to be bright. So you got to give the rapper what the rapper want to get. And pretty much, let's look at this de-esser, how it's working.
I pour numbers inside my cup and get the diatone, but I can't snooze long. Chasing money, I ain't chasing your bullshit. I'm taking steps to a whole nother level. I can tell you ain't the one you would do. You done ran all by a whole nother bezel. We ain't never making up you the room. Then reminiscing what you told me, covering up my feelings with the cold. Then let calls from the noblest. Till I pull up, they know I never run. They know I ain't scared of them. Take the fall for all my problems. They pay.
So the difference between wide and split band is with wide, pretty much it will de-ess the whole signal. So a de-esser is a compressor with a side chain filter pretty much. And essentially when you have it on something like wideband, it's gonna compress the whole audio signal pretty much. But when you have it on split band, it will split it, and this will be the crossover point. So pretty much I'm telling it everything up from 7K and up, de-ess that. And the sidechain compressor, you can have it between band pass, so you can pick specifically that narrow part, or you can do split band, which I used here in the situation to sound very smooth. And after that, we use the fresh air, just to as my S recovery, because it was very, dark at this point. I was really just smoothing off that really high voice, but then I used a little bit of this, fresh air, not necessarily I used a little bit of this fresh air, not necessarily to add brightness, but to recover my brightness, because I used the tape, heavy de-essing, heavy multi-banding, heavy, all of this stuff to just really make sure that the listener can listen to the song over and over and over again. That's the most important thing I think about as an engineer, is replay value. I want people to play the song over and over and over again, but high mid energy, it could really make your ears very tired. So that's what brings me back to what I was talking about in the very beginning. That brings me back to what I was talking about in the very beginning, when I was like, damn, my ears started to get tired because his voice is so high and squeaky, YoungBoy. But then, as I was mixing, I figured out how I could make the vocal sound smooth but still bright at the same time. So if y'all do want the template, go ahead and check it out. Last thing that we have here is something like the RVOCs, just doing what it got to do. Then we have 2 basic delays, nothing crazy, Then after that, we have the Abbey Road chambers, just adding some warmth with the reverb. And I really like what this Abbey Road chamber was doing. It was giving like a certain texture to his vocal. I turned off all the feedback, but then it's very interesting too, because you get a lot of good analog type of rich tones out of that. And then I EQ'd the signal before it even hit the reverb, so the reverb would react differently. So sometimes you might do it before or after. Use the sidechain compressor to really just duck the vocal every time the reverb came in, and we just run it through the effects. This is nothing that new here. And then we had the R-verb as well with the darker vocal plate and all that stuff, giving a little bit dimension. Sometimes I might use 2 reverbs, sometimes I might use 1. Usually if I use 1 reverb and I put the reverb inside of itself, is because I want the reverb to react to the other reverb. So I want to create like a depth within a depth. But if I use 2 different reverbs, I'm actually trying to create a little bit of separation. So then I have a doubler right here for YoungBoy, using that doubler to really just add a little bit more dimension. He has a very high voice, so I want to add a little bit of, I want that vocal to be able to sit inside of the beat with a little bit of body, because I don't want the 808 to just completely abuse his vocal, so that's something to always think about. After that, we had the Abbey Road RS124, just giving a little bit of warmth as well. Let's check out about how much gain reduction we was doing.
I pour numbers inside my cup and get the dye tone, but I can't snow long. Chasing money, I ain't chasing your bullshit. I'm taking steps to a whole nother level. I can tell you ain't the one you would do. You done ran all by a whole nother best, and we ain't never making up you the room. Then reminiscing what you told me, covering up.
All right, then after that, we have something like the L1 limiter, which I used the drum pumper preset because I wanted my limiter to hut. So pretty much a limiter is another compressor, but with a very high ratio. And this one is instantaneous, fast attack, fast release. So it really just gave some breathing to the NBA YoungBoy, some movement. So I kind of already had the vocal pretty stable, but now I still want to bring back a little bit of that movement. So mixing is all about balance, moving, stability, up, down, left to right, stepping forward, stepping backwards. It's all about that. So this is pretty much the video that I have for today. I know this video is kind of long, but like I always try to tell y'all, mixing ain't done overnight. I'm pretty sure that when it takes time to mix a vocal, based on me, it takes me like at least like an hour or 2, or if I'm doing a whole mix with stems, it's going to take me easily 4 hours. 4 or 5 hours. So I hate people who make these little YouTube shorts and that's all they do is short, bus shorty, all of this shorts. And it's like, you can't simplify mixing into something that takes like what, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, this little breadcrumb right here. I'm trying to give y'all the whole meal. So that's what I feel like I did with this type of vocal. It takes time to perfect, you know, it takes time to smooth it out, to get it right. But the template like this will kind of simplify it for you. But still, like if you're mixing like a vocal like that from scratch, it's gonna take you time to like, you know, blend it and mold it. It's like a pottery, you know, you got to slowly shape that bit over time. It's kind of like a farmer. You got to put the seed in the ground, you got to water it slowly and it grows up. So I just want to say thanks a lot for being a great part of my YouTube family. Appreciate y'all now. Peace.